We are joined by Bobby Blanco from MASNsports.com, and in this first segment, we're going to take a look at James Wood, the number one prospect in all of baseball, who's already started to make his impact with the Nationals, but how big of an impact will he have in the second half?
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, make sure to check us out over on Twitter. And of course, while you're at it, make sure to search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcast. So as we get into it today, as you see now, if you're over on YouTube, we are joined by Bobby Blanco from MASNsports.com. Bobby and I will be talking about some big news you could talk about here in DC. That made no sense, but you get the point. We're talking baseball with the Washington Nationals. So, Bobby, later on, we'll be giving out a trade deadline hot take. I've already shared mine with yours. I think it's a little steamy. I'll tell you that in the third segment of today's show. In the second segment, Bobby, you got to be in the intro pressers for some of these draft picks early on. You've got Luke Dickerson, Caleb Lomavita, and of course, Seaver King as well. We'll talk about that and just kind of their growth in the national system and kind of getting some projections. We're going to be really early on this, but when can we expect these guys in the major leagues? We'll have that in the second segment of today's show, but we start off with looking at James Wood and the impact that this guy could bring in the second half of the season. And Bobby, I'm not going to lie with you. I think it could be pretty big. But before we get into it, this episode of Locked On Nationals is brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. So first and foremost, Bobby, as we got that out of the way, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm still trying to, I don't know if you guys can tell, this early in the morning, I'm still looking pretty sleepy. I'm still trying to catch up on my sleep after this AllStar break. Never forget that it's that actually an all-star break for us, members of the media, covering the draft, covering other things. I'm sure we'll get some random news today.
Something will happen.
Something will happen today, of course, because why give us a day off, too? We're not the ones covering the sport 365 days a year. You know, who needs us days off?
You know what? Yeah, you guys have had it rough. I'm not going to lie. Because, again, you get the all-star, quote-unquote, break, and then you jump right into it with the MLB draft that Sunday, and then you have to do player press conferences, player breakdowns, and evals, whatever it does. You guys haven't had no break.
When they moved the break to the all-star, when they moved the draft to the all-star break, it was the worst thing in the world. I knew this was going to happen, and they're never going to go back to it now because they love having it on during the prime time. It's the only sport really happening this week on the calendar, so they get all the eyeballs. But as soon as they did that, it was like the worst thing to happen to us reporters because we used to have an all-star break, and now we don't. So.
Used to. Yeah, well, that is unfortunate, but something that isn't unfortunate so far is James Wood up in the major leagues. So far through 14 games, Bobby, batting .245, a .333 OBP, a .321 slug, and a .654 OPS on the season. James Wood, I think he has been better than what the numbers say, but kind of going into the second half of the season, Bobby, what do you expect with him? Like, do you think he'll have like this big impact on this offense and maybe even try to help propel this Nationals team into an October series, you could say?
Ooh, October series, I'm not quite sure about. I do think he's going to have a huge impact on this lineup. I mean, I think we're going to see him bat second, third most often than not. I think we'll maybe against lefties, we'll see Davey bump him down to like fifth or sixth, like we saw him do near the end of the first half of the season. But no, I mean, you called him up for a reason. He's going to finish out the season at the major league level. And, you know, if you're looking at his first 14 games, small sample size overall, but we can break him down into smaller sample size, right? His first 7 games were fantastic. He was hitting 320. He got the home run out of the way. He had that 5 RBI game in that same game. And he was walking at a similar rate that he was striking out. I think it was 6 to 7. And then over his last 7 games, I think he got a little bit out of his comfort zone. Started chasing a little bit more. Now, I will say, watching some games in Milwaukee and New York to finish out the second half, he did get some bad calls called against him by some umpires. He struck out a couple of times. I want to say it was at least 3 times, maybe only twice, but on bad calls. Or he got put behind an account on bad calls. But that's going to come. We saw the same thing happen with Juan Soto when he was younger. Rookies don't get the benefit of the doubt from umpires. As James grows and becomes more of an all-star, a star-studded player, he'll get that kind of respect and that kind of call from umpires that we're used to seeing. I think his eye is too good. His eye has always been kind of similar to a Juan Soto, where in that if he doesn't swing at it, it's not a strike. So I think that'll come. But he did strike out a lot more over his last 7 games than he did in his first 7 games, and he didn't walk at all. So that's my kind of barometer for James moving forward. Mm-hmm. The hits will come. I think the power will come. And he will play an important role in this lineup. But, it's always going to be up and down, a game of adjustments for him. We'll see how he kind of adjusts back to the adjustments made to him over his second week of the season as a major leaguer.
I think it's kind of something that we saw with Aaron Judge back in the day when he first kind of got in the league. When you were a 6'7" guy, the strike zone is just number one bigger. And even then, umps have to adjust to that. It's not every day you see a 6'7" guy in the lineup. And so it's a little bit different with kind of adjusting to that. And also for James himself, he's going to have to make some adjustments as well. Because again, you mentioned it, he's had 20 strikeouts through his first 14 big league games. And, when you were a young prospect, especially when you're 21 years old, we've seen this time and time again now, Bobby. And we talked about this last week, but the prospects, they struggle. They do struggle making that jump from AAA up into the majors. So we see it now with James Wood. Yeah, the first week was really solid in my opinion. I was not really expecting him to just kind of take that and go on this magical carpet ride where he's going to take the Rookie of the Year and just have a swingingly perfect season. No one was expecting that. We do expect some turbulence along the way, and I think we're kind of hitting that road right now. But as far as James Wood goes, though, what kind of impact do you see him having? Do you think that James Wood could put up by the end of the season when we're talking about him and the impact that he had? Do you think he could have some really solid numbers considering maybe a 750 OPS? Because if he were to have those kind of numbers, in my opinion, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, he's got 654 right now over his first 14 games. I don't think it's crazy that he can get that up over 100 more points in the next 2 months. But overall, just kind of generically, I think he's going to have a similar impact in this lineup that CJ Abrams is going to have, in the sense that when him and CJ aren't going well at the plate, this offense won't be going well at all. I think these two guys are going to get a catalyst with Lane Thomas stuck in between them. We'll talk about more about him later when we talk about the trade deadline. But those are the 3 main guys, possibly only 2 for the last half of the season, for the last month of the season, that are really going to be the catalyst for this offense. And I think that's the kind of impact he had. I mean, not just hitting for average. Hopefully that average comes up as well with his OPS, but also drawing his walks, getting back to that, getting on base. I mean, those couple of games I think I saw in New York when they made some late inning rallies or attempts at rallies, he had some good at bats late in the 9th inning and kind of either getting on base with a single, a hard hit single, or drawing a tough walk. And I think that's kind of the impact he's going to have, where, just because he's struggling right now, and maybe this AllStar break is kind of the break that he needed to maybe kind of reset for the second half. But, I think he is still a tough out for pitchers and for defenses. So with the speed, with the exit velocities, all that stuff, with the eye, everything, he is just overall a tough out. So I think he is going to have a huge impact on this lineup, how this offense produces in the second half. And with him and CJ, like I said, I think it's how they go, this offense goes. So when they're struggling, this offense is going to struggle. But when they're on point and they're crushing the ball and they're getting on base, I think this offense can be a little more dangerous.
I think you brought up some great points there because, again, CJ Abrams, as you kind of mentioned there, through the first half, if CJ Abrams is going to be hitting the ball and driving the ball in for power, hitting guys in, that was the offense so far this season. And he was our consistent producer, as long as Jesse Winker is there as well, but he probably won't be in the fold too long either with the trade deadline coming up in the next few weeks. But we'll have that trade deadline discussion a little bit later on. But just to kind of wrap up James Wood here, I think James Wood could go on a tear in the second half. It's a gut feeling. I don't know what it is, Bobby, but I just can't get past the fact that this guy has done it at every level that he's been at. He's 21 years old, and also he's just one of the most composed guys I've seen come up from AAA, making the jump to the majors. And I think that's kind of one of those things that may be overlooked when talking about some of these prospects. And he knows he's got pressure on him, so we'll see what he can do with his back against the wall in the second half of the season. But I'm predicting a little bit of a James Wood breakout. Why not? So
Yeah, I can see it.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. But Bobby, let's talk about some of these draft guys as the draft's on Sunday night. The Nationals, top 3 picks. You've got Seaver King, Caleb Lomavita, and of course, Luke Dickerson, one of my favorite picks. I'll tell you why Dickerson is one of my favorite picks of that draft. But before we do that, let me tell you guys about some of our very good friends over at eBay Motors. And guys, we talk about eBay Motors, and of course, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Now, let me tell you guys about some of our also very good friends over at Game Time. And guys, I've told you about Game Time before, and you already know that Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And of course, maybe you want to go see the Nationals take on the Reds this weekend. This is what I do. I walk out of the office. I work 2 blocks away from Nationals Park. As I'm walking up Half Street to the center field gate, I open up Game Time. I find their flash deals and, of course, their zone deals as well. And while I do that, it's 2 clicks. Bam, tickets in my hand. I go into the park. I'm there. I see the national anthem. I see all the festivities beforehand. I want you guys to experience that. And, of course, one of my favorite features of Game Time is that they have views from their seats in their venue. All you have to do is click Game Time. You'll see it. And of course, their lowest price is guaranteed, and they have event cancellation protection and of course, job loss protection as well. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, Bobby, we get back into it now as we look into the MLB draft. I mean, I'm going to say this right off the bat. I was stunned the way that the Nationals kind of conducted this draft. And it reeks of one thing. You know, Brad Ciolek came from the Baltimore Orioles this last offseason, and that was kind of one of the key moves. Danny Haas came over from the Arizona Diamondbacks as well to kind of reshape their front office a little bit. And in my opinion, I don't even think it's an opinion anymore, and I think it's a fact at this point. Seaver King, taking him at below slot at number 10 overall, that was the work of Brad Ciolek. Because as far as I've known Mike Rizzo, they have taken the big swing, the big ceiling, taken the best possible player available, and maybe Seaver King was the best player available on their board. There are certainly a lot of people high on him, but it came as a surprise because we weren't really expecting that, or at least I was not expecting that. And even Seaver King said it himself in that presser that the Nationals weren't really on his radar. And so the Nationals, I'm assuming at this point in time, it's going to be a below slot deal at number 10 overall, as he was projected to go like late teens, early 20s in that area. So what is your take on that? Like, do you think that this is just kind of like the new reshaped version of the Nationals front office, and this is kind of how they envision approaching the draft going forward?
Yeah, I think you're spot on right there. I think Brad Ciolek is, we have actual data evidence that the Orioles have had the best drafts over the past 6 drafts since, Mike Elias got there and they started picking with Adley Rutschman. I mean, that's how they got Gunnar Henderson in the second round of a draft. They've gotten so many of their top prospects not in the first round by kind of doing this method of going under slot in their first round picks and then going over slot in the second and third round. So, yeah, I think you're spot on right there. I think this new front office is kind of going that way. I think Brad Ciolek he's more analytically driven, so he can kind of say, hey, let's reach for this guy. We're not going to have to pay as much because we have this group of prospects, draft prospects, and probably going to be available to us in the second and third round that are going to have to overpay for them to sign, i.e. high school players. And so I think that played a major role. That and also sticking to college bets. They only drafted 2 high schoolers in this entire draft out of their 21 picks. They only drafted 2 guys out of high school. Last year it was a different regime, but they kind of said we're going to shift towards that because what happens when you draft college bats is you get guys with obviously more experience, especially guys playing in tough leagues like the SEC, like the Big 12, like the ACC, baseball-driven conferences. And, they're closer to the majors. They're more prepared for the minor leaguers. We saw the Nationals have, I think it was like 4 of their top 5 draft picks from last year's class reach AA by the end of the season. And that's the kind of, that's to me a sign that they think that they're closer to competing at the major league level than others do, so that they have some top tier prospects coming in. These guys are on a fast track to the majors. So by the time that they're ready for the majors, the Nationals are also competing at the major league level, and they have some more depth right there. But yeah, I think when it comes to Seaver King, I think that's exactly what happened. I was also a little surprised because I thought there were a handful of other guys that were rated higher than Seaver. I know some publications did have King rated in that 10 to 12 range in the draft. So it wasn't that much of a stretch, but it was a little bit of a stretch. And I think for that underslot kind of reason, I'll be interested to see what the money is, in these coming weeks. I've seen reports that he's on his way to DC today to sign his papers. So we should be getting a figure sometime this weekend, hopefully, about how much he is signing for. And then we can kind of then make some more evaluations and adjustments on how this front office approaches this draft.
It was a very interesting approach, in my opinion. And honestly, if you're going to sign me up for any organization out there and follow any organization right now, it's the Baltimore Orioles. So to see what they were doing there, cutting deals, at least we assume it was a deal that was cut at number 10 overall. And to get guys like Luke Dickerson out of high school, in my opinion, Bobby, the second round pick for the Nationals this year, Luke Dickerson, listen, I mean, not many people knew about him coming into this draft, but if you look at his profile and then you look at some of the numbers this guy put up, he tied the high school record for home runs with Mike Trout. I mean, in New Jersey, by the way. That is right then and there. I'm like, well, okay. And if you look at his profile, he's a pretty big kid, 18 years old, coming out of the high school ranks. I mean, 55 grade power. He's got a 60 grade run, solid in the field. I think there are some swing and miss issues that he has had throughout his high school career. That's at least from what I've read so far. But as far as that goes, that is one of my favorite picks because I look back at the days where Brad Ciolek was with the Baltimore Orioles, and there was one guy out of the second round named Gunnar Henderson out of a prep high school in Alabama. And I'm not saying that this guy's going to be Gunnar Henderson, but then if you look at their profiles and just kind of click 2 and 2 together, I get a little giddy about this pick. Now, again, the big question is can the Nationals develop this kid? But not even looking at that, though, this is the exciting pick. This is why you take your Seaver King at number 10 overall and cut that quote-unquote deal with him. To have someone like Dickerson, who may have gone to college, but you're probably going to give him a little bit more money in that second round, and also Caleb Lomavito, who we'll talk about after this. But, Bobby, I love that Dickerson pick. I don't know about you. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting pick. So many things to kind of digest right here. I want to talk about, since we're discussing going over slot, under slot when it comes to Seaver and Dickerson, and then also how Brad Ciolik ties into all this. Let's go back to 2021. The Orioles have the number 5 overall pick. They select Colton Cowser, who was coming out of college, who was projected to go later in the first round. They drafted him at 5th overall, and they signed him for about $1.5 million less than the pick value.
Yeah.
So looking for that for that kind of thing for Seaver King. Now Colton Cowser is in the running for AL Rookie of the Year this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second round pick, they picked Connor Norby, who a little under slot value, but not as much, who is now one of the top prospects in all of baseball. So it's kind of a similar thing where you got to go really undervalue in the first round so you can go overvalue later, or pay a little closer to value than you would have. And then when it comes to King and Dickerson, look, Dickerson, you mentioned tying Mike Trout's home run record in Jersey. He would have beaten it, but he started his baseball season late because he was too busy winning a hockey championship for his high school.
And I love that profile, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I love like a multi-sport athlete, like when you kind of go in there. So, and of course it's like hockey. So it's like, this guy's a little gritty, like obviously, I mean, you got to love that. So
6 foot, 185. I mean, on skates, that's probably like 6'3", right?
Yeah.
So, but you know, I asked him about like, how did being a 2-sport athlete, both sports where you're like handling a stick, a bat type thing, kind of help you in your baseball. And he was like, yeah, you have to be gritty around the net, just like you have to be gritty in the batter's box. You gotta have to battle. And then the hand-eye coordination is just like off the charts when it comes to hockey, obviously, and that translates so well into baseball, both at the plate and fielding at shortstop. So I think this kid is super athletic. He had a commitment to UVA. When he talked to us, he did mention that he was ready to sign with the Nationals. He didn't officially say that, but like he hinted that he's gonna bypass college and sign with the Nats. And I think that's why he's going to, because the Nationals are going to be able to underpay Seaver King with their first round pick and overpay their second round pick and Luke Dickerson. So yeah, I think that's a very smart, crafty way to approach the draft. Now, you mentioned the comparison to Gunnar Henderson. I mean, again, he's only 6 foot, 185. He's obviously going to grow into that more because he's coming out of high school. I think Gunnar obviously ends up being a little bigger than him, but that's still a solid frame to play shortstop, to play maybe third base, second base. Versatility. I mean, if he brings the athleticism from the ice rink to the baseball field, then that's going to put him wherever they want. And he'll produce at the plate. So I think it's a very interesting prospect. It's a very intriguing one as well, and probably could be one of the fan favorites when we look back at this draft in a couple of years.
And we didn't even get to Caleb Lomavita, but again, there were rumors that the Nationals would quote unquote cut a deal with him as well at number 10 overall. I mean, the guy is a solid catcher at this point in time, coming out of college. So there's really going to be no pressure for him. You got Keibert Ruiz, but the pressure is on Keibert Ruiz, but I'll have more on that for tomorrow's show, Bobby. But
I will say before we move on, Caleb was the best, hands down, draft press conference we have ever had. Fans are going to love this kid. So personable, so funny. Just like a happy, smiley kid. Like, he's just happy to be here. He was like, this is my first press conference ever. I'm so excited. So I think he's going to be a fan favorite quickly in this Nats farm system.
And you know what? Like, I'm not in all those, but I will say, like, once you get to the major league level, you're not really, or at least for some of the guys, you're not really thrilled to talk to the media.
Hey.
So to get someone like that, it's nice.
I'll take it as long as he wants to talk to us. As long as he loves it, I'll take it.
We'll see what it's like in next year when we're in West Palm Beach again, Bobby. See if he's really about that, and really if he wants to talk to the media.
I think he's going to be. It's going to be his first major league spring training. He's going to be smiling all ear to ear all day.
That's at least the hope at this point in time. But all right, Bobby, I'm going to give you my MLB trade deadline hot take. I got one for you, and like, I'm not going to lie, like I think it's going to piss off some Nationals fans. So we'll get into that. But let me tell you guys about our friends over at Booking.com. And this episode of Locked On Nationals is brought to you by Booking.com. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rivals' cities with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rivals' city. Of course, maybe you're taking a trip up to Chicago later this year when the Nationals head up to Wrigley Field, and you want to get your best deal for hotels and, of course, maybe even a family stay and maybe even a hotel that overlooks Wrigley Field. Well, if you do that, you can check out Booking.com. And, of course, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even in your rivals or even Chicago, like I was mentioning. So book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Now, let me tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. And guys, we've talked about Prize Picks before, and Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. When the final's over. The hoops action doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball is still heating up with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Breanna Stewart, Aja Wilson, and you can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. And of course, Prize Picks is live in my home state, Virginia, as well as California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Speaking of something that's not easy, Bobby, the MLB trade deadline. I've got a hot take for you.
All right.
Nationals fans, buckle up. I'm sorry. The Lane train is going to be leaving the station. I think right now, as we sit here today, July 18th, the Nationals will trade away Lane Thomas and Kyle Finnegan. The reason why I think Lane Thomas is gone is because I look at James Wood in left field. It doesn't look natural for him. I think as far as you keep him out there in left field, the less that he will actually develop. And I think the Nationals will actually realize that because James Wood is not a left fielder. That's not where he's going to play. I think if they were smart and if they're really kind of thinking ahead of the future, you would trade Lane Thomas now. Now, are you going to get some massive prospect haul for him? No. But I think you should take the best deal possible out there for him. Let's say the Brewers call or name that team. Take whatever they are going to give. The best prospect haul out there, you trade away Lane Thomas, and then, of course, on top of that, you trade your all-star closer with Kyle Finnegan. I think their price tags will never be higher as it is this deadline. They've got a few years left of control, each of them. And again, the time is now, man. Like, you see the future. I love Lane Thomas. I think he's been one of the masterclass trades of the Mike Rizzo era, and alongside Trey Turner, and, of course, the Juan Soto deal as well. But Bobby, I think it's time to say goodbye to Lane Thomas and Kyle Finnegan. What do you think?
I'm struggling with the definition of a hot take. Like, I think that's the take, right? I think everyone assumes it's going to be those two guys because they're the most intriguing. They're the biggest names for this team. Mm-hmm. I hear you. I think we had this conversation last time I was on, and I don't see them trading Lane just for the sake of James Wood moving to right field. Mm-hmm. I see them trading Lane because someone blows them away with a package that Mike Rizzo can't say no to. I think the biggest thing that Lane and Kyle Finnegan have going for them, besides their numbers, their productivity, is the extra year of control. And we saw Mike Rizzo leverage that same situation with Hunter Harvey for a pick and a prospect right before the draft. Mm-hmm. Now, the deadline, you might be able to muscle out a couple of prospects. It's not going to be a top-tier prospect. You're not going to get a system's number 1 overall prospect. But he got the number 2 overall prospect from the Royals, Granted, not a really strong farm system at the moment, but their number 2 prospect and a pick for Hunter Harvey before the deadline. That's before a team is getting desperate. So I think the biggest thing with these two guys is that extra year. And with teams get more and more desperate, he can leverage that into, a top 10 prospect from a good farm system. And then maybe someone else, like kind of like we saw with DJ Hers and Kevin Made last year, but better because Jamer Candelario was only, a rental. So I think that's the biggest thing going for them. My hot take is they are going to trade an outfielder and a relief pitcher. It's just not going to be the ones you think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Jesse Winker and Dylan Floro. And I think my even hotter take, I think fans are going to be like, there's no way. I think that Mike Rizzo is going to be able to trade Derek Law at the deadline. Despite his struggles at the end of the second half, and especially with his struggles with runners on base, inherited runners. You look at his numbers when he comes in with clean bases, they're solid across the board. He actually has good numbers solid across the board anyways, but they're inflated because whenever he has an inherited runner, he lets them score and gives them a bunch of hits. So I think that it's going to be Jesse Winker. I think it's going to be Dylan Floro, and I think Derek Law actually does get spun at the deadline. And it's going to be kind of like a John Lester, Lane Thomas deal. I think he can get, a prospect back, take a flyer on him. We'll see what happens. And maybe that guy blossoms into the next Lane Thomas. I think Mike Rizzo sees this as the last deadline in a long time that they are sellers. So they're going to sell off everyone on a 1-year deal, and he's going to try his best to hold on to guys that he can also maybe spin next year if necessary, but also contribute to a winning team if necessary, and that's Finnegan and Lane Thomas. So I'm guessing my picks are Winker, Floro, and Law at the deadline for 3 to 6 prospects total.
I'll take that any day of the week. And you know what else I'll take? Bobby Blanco on Locked On Nationals. I'll take it any day of the week, Bobby. You're always welcome here. You have a home here.
I feel welcome here. This feels like great.
It's home. It's home. And I want to do West Palm Beach again with you next year.
Oh, hell yeah. Well,
I want to do it with you. You come back to our Airbnb. We can have some fun at the pool.
Hey, maybe I'll stay with you guys instead.
Yeah, you could stay with us. You could stay with us at West Palm.
Yeah.
I loved it. So, Bobby, always appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. Good talking with you. And we'll see. We'll probably talk closer to the deadline.
I'm sure we will. And you know what? That's Bobby Blanco from MASNsports.com. I'm Ryan Clary. We will catch you guys on the flip side. Nats baseball starts again tomorrow night.